Hi, and welcome to Outlaw Bookseller with me, Stephen E. And this is something I was going to leave for a while, but the feeling is here now, and the feeling will always be there. But I've thought about little else the last few days, and I'm talking about the passing of my favourite living author, except of course he's no longer living, Christopher Priest, and of my relationship with him, which I would sort of describe as a friendship. We didn't see each other as much as we would have liked, but we were pretty close for a long time from 1987. I want to add here that this video is not monetized. It is done purely out of a sense of love, and I've really been moved by the comments here. Thanks to everybody who's already commented on the community pages and in the post below the videos and on my social media feeds. And I'm going to be passing links to these comments on to Nina Allan, Chris's wife, and a very fine writer in herself, so that she can see the touching sentiments and the praise for his work that's been expressed here. And I hope one day that we'll maybe talk on the channel with Nina about Chris after the rawness has subsided a little, which, you know, if it ever will. I also want to pass these links on to Leigh Kennedy, his previous wife, and the mother of his children, Simon and Elizabeth, and my condolences to them. And I'd very much like Leigh to see this as well, because she's a very fine writer. I know we've covered both Nina and Leigh on the channel a little. There'll be more about Leigh and more about Nina ongoing. So this really isn't a facts and figures video. It's just a personal memorial, really. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk about my own personal experiences and reminiscences of this very, very fine writer who I'll miss enormously as both a friend and an author who changed my life. And, you know, Chris was a great guy. And I think the whole world of SF and, you know, the community around literary outsiders really, really have felt this blow, even if those of us in the know knew it was coming. So great, great shame. So I'm just going to talk about my experiences, my personal meetings, various high points over the years of my friendship with Chris, and really go through that for you. I've mentioned some of these things on the channel before, but these are the moments which have been coming back to me aside from the reading of the work. And I was in work on Monday. He passed on the Friday, and it was very quiet. And I went downstairs to where the SF is, and I was going down there to take some books down. And I walked past the SF section, and there was nobody there. And I wandered over, and his books were there. And the Glamour is always face out when I'm around, and there's a handwritten recommendation. And I just thought, you're still here, mate. You know, you're still here. The immortality through art is the important thing. You're still here. And, you know, we will do everything we can on this channel. I know you will as well, viewers, to spread the word about his amazing work. And I'm really gratified to hear how many of you have discovered him through the things I've done on the channel about him. And I know he was very pleased with that as well. And he would, you know, love to have seen your reactions. So there we go. We met for the first time at the Brighton Worldcon in 1987. I'd been reading Chris for about 3 or 4 years at that point. The first book of his I read was Dream of Wessex, which I picked up in the Pan Lozenge edition because it was so beautiful. I hadn't heard of him, and that would have been probably 83, 84. And I bought it from the Chapter Art Centre bookshop, Oriel, in Charles Street in Cardiff. And they also had Darkling Island as well. And I bought the books, and they sounded brilliant. And I read Dream of Wessex, and I thought, wow, this guy's really got what I like. You know, he's like another Wyndham or Ballard, but he's kind of neither, but he's both at the same time. And he had his own way of looking at things. And somebody recently said on social media about how when they read A Dream of Wessex, how brilliant he depicted the villain of the piece, because the guy who was the villain didn't think he was a villain. He thought he was doing the right thing. And that's the sort of subtlety of Priest's writing with characters. You know, he didn't sort of rely on sort of pat ways out of things. He looked at things very objectively. And that was his big thing, the subjective and the objective. What is real? What is reality? And the person I always think of when I consider Chris's work is Philip K. Dick. And even though their writing styles were quite different, they did look at, the same sort of perception issues, but with different outcomes. There's nothing of the religious really in Chris's work in the same sense there is in PKD's, but more on that when we look at the work in other videos. when we met at the Worldcon, I think it was the very first day I was there, and the first panel I went to was one with William Gibson, Norman Spinrad, and I'm trying to think who else. And Gibson delivered quite a sort of blistering attack on the sort of coziness of British literary SF, of the late new wave, and how something new had come and he was part of it. And it was very, very exciting. And Norman Spinrad was there, and Spinrad had had a reputation for sort of attitude and verve, which I saw in his work as passion. To me, it was just passion. He had a reputation for being quite sort of spiky and tough. And it was exciting talking to both of them. And one of the first things I said to Norman, I met him twice during the con, was, have you read the work of Christopher Priest? And of course he had. They knew each other in the 60s, but I wasn't as well versed then in 87 as I am now. I'd really been starting to study SF seriously about 85, and I was early in my surround reading, and there was no sort of internet then and stuff. And yes, and he said, yeah, he's great, he's a really good writer. And I think it was a day or two later that Chris was doing a signing, and there I was, and I had long black hair then, and I seem to remember I was wearing white drain pipes, and I think it was either that day or a day later or before I met Moorcock at a signing, and Dave Brock from Hawkwind talked to me in a corridor, and it was just fantastic. And straight away we just started talking. I can't remember what I said, but we hit it off straight away. We had a kind of natural affinity. Both Chris and I had a certain focus of intent on writing and concepts, and I think we both could see that intuitively straight away. And something that he gave me when, I think it was an hour or two later, or we bumped into me in the dealer's room, he was distributing the original printing, the 30-copy signed, numbered, limited, self-published chapbook, which he'd done in kind of A4 size, of what became the last Dead Lost Visions. The Book on the Edge of Forever is what the trade edition was called, which is where he looked at Harlan Ellison's Last Dangerous Visions and, took it apart and said, look, you need to fess up. It's not going to happen. And of course, Harlan wasn't very happy about that. But that was Chris. He had a really good debating manner, and he would bring out the facts, and he was objective. And I would say he was never cruel. He was honest about what he felt. But, sometimes these things needed to be said. So there you go. It was difficult for me because I love Harlan's work as well. But I was really touched that he gave me, who he'd only just met, a copy. And I think that really showed me that objectively there was something special between us. There was a spark that would base a friendship. And he said, there's a party in a certain room in Convention Hotel tonight. Come along. Me and my mate Stu, who was with me, went along. And, he was there, and he was there with a lady called Leigh Kennedy, who I didn't really realize at the time she was a writer, and she was charming. And we were talking, and we hung out a bit, had some drinks and things. And I say that, the details are vague, but Chris said to me, where do you live? And I said, in Bath. And he said, I live in Pewsey in Wiltshire, just down the road. Give me your phone number and I'll give you a call and we'll get together. And I gave him my phone number, and I thought he was just being kind. I thought nothing of it, but it was brilliant. I mean, I'd been back from the con a couple of weeks after that, and I'd had money saved up for books, and that was really when I became a collector, and I had to buy extra bags of the books, and it was quite exciting stuff. And I bought a few of Chris's things there. I bought a hardcover of Anticipations, one of the anthologies he edited, which I still have. I got that signed by several contributors there. I think Aldous and Bob Shaw, who are both brilliant as well. I met Aldous again later after that. But it was incredible to walk around that event and talk to these great figures, and it's just amazing. And it was weird. I was more focused at the time on who wasn't there. Bester was supposed to be there, but he was sick, so he couldn't be. Roberts wasn't there. Ballard wasn't there. Farmer wasn't there. Allison and Delaney. Everybody else was. Tom Dish wasn't, but everybody else was, and it was funny. So meeting somebody like Silverberg or Joe Haldeman, it was like, yeah, okay, fine. But it was just great. It really was. And it was an amazing time for me. And I've never been to another Worldcon, even though I've thought of it many times, because that was just the one. And I felt it would never be as good again. And I probably should have gone to some other ones, but there you go. So a couple of weeks, as I say, after I got back from the con, the phone rang in our flat in North Parade in Bath, where Jane Austen used to live, in that neck of the woods. And, we had this Georgian flat with these terrible sash windows, which I hated. and the phone rang and it was Chris. And we made a date, and Pat, my partner, the video widow, and I went over to Pewsey. We got the train to Swindon, and we could have got the train actually to Pewsey, which I didn't realise, but he came and picked us up in the car. And I think it was just incredible because, we were invited over for Sunday lunch, and it was great fun, and we chatted. And the first thing I noticed was that really Chris's books, he took the jackets of all his books. So he had hundreds and hundreds. The room was lined with hardcover novels, no jackets. He said, I still got them, they're all filed away, but I like them to be plain. And that was fantastic. And Leigh was charming, and we had a great chat. And we walked through Pewsey, we went for a stroll after lunch, and we walked over this bridge. And because a bridge is like a liminal space, and we leaned on the bridge and looked over, and Chris was telling me he was writing a book called Explanations, which was a quasi-sequel to The Affirmation about the cousin of Ciri from The Affirmation, or is Ciri in The Miraculous Cane? But the details are vague in my memory now. And the book would be called Explanations. And I thought, wow, what a great title. As it turned out, it became The Quiet Woman. And when I read The Quiet Woman, which was published in 1990, finished in 89, so I regard it as an 80s book, it was clearly set in a village modelled on Pewsey. And I felt very much at the time that the female writer who was the protagonist of the book was possibly based on his experiences of women, with women like Lisa Tuttle, his second wife, brilliant writer, and Leigh Kennedy, his then current paramour. And I could see flashes of Leigh's character maybe in the central character of The Quiet Woman. And that's my feeling anyway. I don't know whether that was true. I never talked about that with him. So that was a wonderful memory. And Chris dropped into the shop and did an informal signing of some of his stuff, and Leigh did as well. And I don't know, I think it was before that I realised that Leigh was a writer, and we had copies of her books in Jonathan Cape, the wonderful Journal of Nicholas the American, and the short story collection Faces, neither of which have ever had mass market publications in the UK. And, it was great. It was great hanging out with them, and the video widow was with us as well. And, we had a lot of fun. It was nice to be in touch, phone calls, occasional meets in Bath. And as I say, visit to Pewsey, marvellous stuff. Time went on, and Chris and Leigh moved to Hastings. We, by that point in the early 90s, were living a bit further out of Bath, and we went down the stairs one day to go to work, and there was a letter on the floor. Opened the envelope, and it said, "This is how we are, wonder if you're okay." And it was a round robin, and he wrote that in his own hand. I've got it here somewhere. And it was a round robin saying his children had been born, and their names, their weights, and when they were born, which was great. And I turned to the video and I said, he'll write a book about twins next. And yeah, that's what happened. And that was The Prestige, of course. And, through various communications, say he went on to Hastings then. So we didn't see so much of each other in the 90s, which was a shame. I wish we had. And a couple of years into the 90s, one of the letters I had from Chris said, I'm a bit fed up with trying to break into literary mainstream. I've sort of done this, I've done that, and they won't let me in, and I won't get the respect I deserve and things. We didn't actually say that, but that was very much, he felt he should have been in that coterie, that he should have broke through, and he should have got the wide readership that the other writers from his generation, the best of young British novelists, the first Granta thing that he was in, and he was certainly the equal, and in my opinion, better than all of them. And, but his work was just out there, and he came from the ghetto of SF, which of course they want to keep you in. As Brian Aldiss said, SF's no good, they bellow till we're deaf. And if it's good, then it's not SF. But what can you do? And he said, I'm going to write a good old-fashioned science fiction novel. And it was The Prestige, of course. And I saw a change in his style here. And I'm going to talk about that in another video because I do think it's quite significant. I brought it up in the second interview we did on the channel, and I am going to cover it a lot in the third one, which will be just me, I'm afraid, because Chris is gone, when I look at the last tranche of his work. And I've got some things to say about that, which I hope you'll find interesting. And I'm looking forward to doing some rereading and making notes about that and filming that video. So, life went on, and The Prestige came out. I sold a lot of copies of it in hardcover. I was running Waterstones in Swansea at the time. I got 20 odd in. I sold them no problem. Doesn't sound like a lot, but believe you me, there was quite a lot then. And then I moved to a bookshop in Bristol. I was still selling it there in hardcover. And Chris wrote to me and told me about how his then agent and then publisher turned down the idea of a sequel to The Prestige, because basically The Prestige was a critical but not a commercial success as far as the agent and the publisher were concerned, because it won the James Tate Black Memorial Award, which is the oldest prize for literary fiction in the UK. It also won the World Fantasy Award, which is much a literary award as a genre award, and you should look at the list because it's really important. And it's the only book that's ever won those two awards as well. So he was a bit frustrated by that because he wanted to write the sequel. And I thought, wow, that would be really interesting because he'd never done a sequel. There was the web-like Dream Archipelago stories, the affirmation and the stories which had been leaching out since the mid-70s, and then into the novels which came in this century. But it was not something which was deemed to happen, which was a shame, really. So time moved on, and I remember I commissioned an essay from Chris in 1998. I was editing Waterstone's Literary Diary for 1999, and the theme was identity. There was a large desk diary, which was cloth-bound, and a smaller green cloth-bound pocket one. And that was a great project. I did 6 weeks in that. There was virtually no internet then. I didn't have internet access, a lot of research. And Chris was the first person I contacted to commission an essay from. And he wrote a piece for me called The Crossing. And I think, let's see, I've actually got the manuscript here. There's a covering letter, 11th of May, 1998. That's the day after my birthday. So how old was I then in 98? Gosh, let's work it out. 35. And yeah, and a really nice letter. And there's the actual manuscript of The Crossing, which, as I understand, is uncollected. Maybe that'll pop up in something. And that's how we worked then. You know, we sort of went by letters mostly, so I didn't have email. And I've got other bits of ephemera, other letters and things from Chris, which are very, very precious to me, as I imagine you'd expect. You know, I've got a complete collection of his first editions, loads of them signed, with some lovely, lovely inscriptions that he put in, which are really warm and friendly. And, you know, when I look at them next, it's going to be quite a moving thing, I think. So that was great fun. I remember also contacting J.G. Ballard to see if he'd do something. He wrote me a letter back, handwritten letter, which I still have amongst my Ballard ephemera. And he said, this seems like a great idea, Steve, to do something about identity in literature. But I'm very busy on the new novel, and absolutely fine. I talked to Ian Sinclair on the phone. He was too busy as well. I got a couple of other great writers in the end to do pieces, but to get Chris into that was really great. And because issues of identity and subjectivity and truth are central to his work, very, very much so. So other great events, other great things that happened. I mean, I remember talking to Chris after his appearance at the Bath Lit Fest around 2004, and The Separation had just come out in paperback, and he was up with a author who had sold a hell of a lot of books, one bestseller, and we talked about how dreadful we thought her prose was. And I talked to the director of the Lit Fest. I think the literary director then was lady who wrote for Virago. I think it was Michelle Roberts, I think. And she said, oh, you know, we didn't mention SF in the Bath Lit Fest because it'll just put people off. And Chris, of course, he played the audience and he sort of hinted about what the book was about, but he sort of held things back. And he was great, you know, he's really good. And I was in the front row. And we caught up after that. That was nice. And then it just seems like in a blink of an eye, 2006, you know, the Prestige was filmed. And, you know, he was really excited and we had some back and forth about that. And it was great because I was thinking, oh, finally, he's going to have a breakthrough. He's going to get what he deserves. It's going to be amazing. And he quite liked Nolan's work. You know, he said to me that he liked Memento. And I think he's written about that on his website. And really, I was invited with friends. And there was an initial screening for a very small group, which was a private one. And some of the sort of stars were there. And I know he met some of the stars, and he did talk to me about an exchange with Michael Caine, which I'll talk about when Michael Caine's no longer with us, because I do like Michael Caine, but I would like to quite reveal that, but we won't go any further with that now. I don't know if he met Scarlett Johansson. I did ask him, but I can't recall, because she was like in the first bloom of fame then, really. And, you know, I said to him, what's it like being, you dealing with Hollywood. And we were in the pub together, and he said, they treat you like shit, but at least they give you some money, which is good. And he deserved it because, he struggled a lot financially, difficult, never having a bestseller, just working away and focusing on his art and not thinking about commerce, really. It was a great thing. So, yeah, the friends and family showing, I mean, the guest list was incredible. Ken Faree from Dawn of the Dead was on it. He was a friend of Chris's. And Joanne Whalley-Kilmer was on it. They didn't turn up, unfortunately. I wasn't bothered by that. I wanted to meet writers and people who were there just to talk to. Robert Holtstock was there, who I talked to before and met before, who was great. And I remember Chris sort of gently chiding him and saying, "Oh, he makes such a fuss about things. He's so, he's so uptight and stuff." But you could see they really loved each other. And of course, Holtstock died some time ago, and he was a nice guy. Christopher Evans, the Welsh SF writer, was there. And I was too in awe to talk to him. I'll talk to any writer, but because he was Welsh, an SF writer, I was, oh, wow. I talked to Alistair Reynolds, who was charming, he was from South Wales, like me. Liz Williams was there, Paul Macaulay, Markham Edwards, the Golanks, big guy. Loads of other people were there. A particularly nice person who was there was Sarah Briggs, who's Holtstock's wife. Charming lady, absolutely lovely. Leigh Kennedy was there. I met the kids, and it was fantastic. And it was wonderful to sit in the cinema and see the film and see his vision transferred onto the screen, and to think, finally he's going to get the attention he deserves, which he did. And at the same time, he didn't, because, of course, even though that boosted his sales and his fame, you say to people now, The Prestige with Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, and, the people glaze over a bit and you say, about The Magicians. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, there were the tranche of magician films around there. And there were other novels that appeared at the end of the 90s about magicians, about stage figures. So there you go. Priest got there first again. So I remember that evening as well, we went to a club in London called Tiger, which is quite famous, which of course made us think of Bester, and the cream, of British SF were there. And it was a really great event, and it was super to talk to everybody. Really, really was a really special night. I absolutely loved it. And he was, he was on cloud nine. But we did say, we talked in the pub beforehand, and I said, what are you going to do now? And he said, Steve, I think I'm going to quit. I'm going to retire because I'm burned out. And I thought, well, you can't blame him. He's got a little bit of money coming in now from the film, and it would have been such a shame. But of course, he came back big time, and he did loads and loads of work between the release of The Prestige and, this passing. So it was fantastic to see him flower and really get back into work and enjoy it, which was a great thing. And enjoy it, he definitely did, even though he was always self-deprecating his quality. He always wanted to be better, always wanted to be a better writer. Was that possible? Probably not, as far as I'm concerned, but there you go. And, I talk with other people, other artists, about Chris's work. I remember talking to John Fox a few years ago about the Glamour and its similarity to his conceptual work, The Quiet Man, which started as short stories, eventually published as a book, was referenced in lots of his music and songs. And Fox, he was really, really excited. And Chris was excited that I talked to John about this. And I think really the last time we met was sadly 6 or 7 years ago. And we did an event at a bookshop in Bath for one of Chris's books. And I think it was The Adjacent, probably was The Adjacent. It would have been in 2016. And he was in fine form as ever. And I introduced him to John Wyndham's niece. He was fascinated to meet her. And he, met some of my friends, local fans and sort of readers, some of whom he'd met before. And, he was as warm and funny as ever. And Nina Allan was the support. And Nina did a reading from her book, The Race, which is a really interesting SF novel. There's so much in it. It's like a kaleidoscope. Fantastic stuff. And Nina's own work, just as an aside, The Rift, which I think is her finest novel, my favourite novel by her, definitely shows the influence of Priest. Very, very much so. So on to the man himself, more beyond my reminiscences, and that's just a scattering of them, really. He had an easy, assured confidence. He was beyond cool. He didn't need to try and be cool or to exude an icy aloofness. So I'm an author. He was just a regular guy. You know, he was an ordinary guy, but he was an extraordinary guy. He was as naturally as sharp and incisive in his work as he was in conversation, as he was in interactions. But he was never without warmth, and he always had that self-deprecating wit and irony, which was great. He was always unpredictable. You can never tell what he was going to say, but that was the fun of it. And also that's very, very much in the work. So that's my memories of Chris, some of my memories of Chris. And I've mentioned some on the channel before, but those are the things which really stand out. And really, you know, personal things aside, when you know a writer, it's interesting because, of course, I don't like to get too close to writers. I like to have some distance. And I know various people like M. John Harrison. I knew Ballard a little. Mick Herron is somebody I know. And you form, when you get warm relationships with Mick Herron and I, Mike Harrison and I, you know, we on and off. Moorcock I used to know a long time ago. We did some great memorable events together, all fine, wonderful human beings. But it is important to keep that distance. So I always like to try and keep a distance. And that's probably why I didn't see him as much as I'd like to have done, because I wanted to keep that objectivity. But the thing is, this book, above all others in his work, changed my life. Everything I read by him changed my life in a way. And I'm going to talk about that in future videos. And I've already spoken about it in some. But this book, The Glamour, really made the difference. I had just read this when it came out, and I think I read it first in paperback in the Abacus edition, which I have here, in 1986. So it was literally the year before the Worldcon. And even though I'd already read his books, it blew me away. And I backtracked and got this edition. And let's see, this is signed and dedicated to me. There's the man on the back. He was so cool as well. You know, he's a cool looking guy. You know, he really was a great guy. And inside, what have I got inside? There's a bookmark, and this looks like a handwritten letter. Yeah. 1988. Wow. Thanks for your card. Thanks for your loyalty in the face of shrinking expectations. We both enjoyed seeing you in Bath. Would you like to come over for lunch on Saturday or Sunday? Oh, yeah. So this is it. Yeah. So there we go. So that's the letter from 88. My gosh. And yeah, I've got things like this scattered through the books, you know, letters and little bits and pieces and things. So yeah, it's it changed my life, because this is a profound book. You can't really talk about the plot. It's about what we see and what we don't see, about our differences as people and our similarities, and how the way we look at the world always keeps us alone, and about the difficulty of making connections. And it's also very, very exciting metaphysical thriller. Is it an SF novel? I think it's an SF novel. It takes something from one of the great SF authors and twists it in a way which only priests could do. And he talked about literary influence, and really, he said it's not copying, it's inspiration. And that's the thing. So The Glamour is very much the one. So if you haven't read anything by him, read The Glamour, as it is sublime. It will change your life. Alternatively, if you want to commit to reading all his work, read it from the beginning chronologically, because you'll see this wonderful development right across his career, which is just stunning. And I will be talking about that, as I say, in another video when I handle the third and final tranche of his work, the work we didn't get to do a interview about, but we wanted to. So yeah, do read The Glamour. It'll change your life. And, you know, it's an incredible book. And when I got my boss at the time when I met Chris to read it, and he was a big fan of Iris Murdoch, a lot of serious sort of mainstream fiction. And, you know, he said I was pushing my kids out of the way when I was reading it to try and concentrate. And he had toddlers there, you know, to keep quiet, because I just was gripped by it so much. And I'll never forget my old boss, Peter, saying that, you know. So, but this is the thing, this icy intelligence and genius was just amazing, because he was always at ease as a human being, and he put you at your ease in interaction. And, you know, and women clearly loved him. You know, he was exceptionally sort of cool guy, and he had great taste. He married 3 great writers, Lisa Tuttle, Leigh Kennedy, Nina Allan. But, you know, writers drift, they can be wayward, they're outsiders, and they have to follow their muse. And that is the thing more than anything else. But that commitment to his art, and the way that he and his art were similar, really sort of came through to me. You know, I could see him in his art and they became indivisible. But I never, ever had that feeling where I want to go back so far that we don't have any content. And you could see that with some authors I've met. I've wanted to hold back more, or I've got to a certain point and I've thought, I don't want to get any closer to them because I really want to keep the distance. With Chris, his life and his work and he were the same thing. And that's why art is so important. It's a way of looking into somebody else's mind and their mind merging with yours, the third mind, as Burroughs and Geisen called it. And that's why Ice by Anna Kavan was one of his favourite books. So there we go. What can I say? It's very difficult to say any more at this time about him, and I shall miss him terribly. But, you know, the great thing is his work is still there. Chris, you're still there, mate. You're still there. And although we'll miss you in the flesh, your work will sustain us and we will keep talking about it. And this video is dedicated to Nina Allan, to Elizabeth and Simon, to Leigh Kennedy, to Lisa Tuttle, and all of Chris's friends and people who knew him. And, you know, we celebrate his life. What a great man he was, and what an amazing, amazing, astonishing writer, sui generis. Bye, Chris.